because there is too much artificial intelligence available, and our minds, instead of evolving, get blunted. So our minds need to remain sharp, and we need to constantly work upon the basic mathematical skills, counting skills, differential skills, so that we remain above board and we remain in control of artificial intelligence, and not the other way around, that I have forgotten my tables because a calculator is available to me.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
We are honored and privileged to have you here in ICD, Academy for Cultural Diplomacy in Berlin. And I'm Rachayita, student of Masters in International Relations and Cultural Diplomacy. And ma'am, thank you for coming here. And ma'am has served as in the Ministry of States for External Affairs and Culture. And ma'am was also a former Member of Parliament. Ma'am, I have a few questions for you for today, since we are here for a conference in peace and democracy, and in that respect, so in the cultural diplomacy. And I just wanted to ask you, how is cultural diplomacy in and as for India?
I think if any country can talk or discuss about cultural diplomacy, it has to be got to be India.
Yes.
Because all the different subcultures within one large culture of tolerance and acceptance that India exhibits, I don't think there is any other country in the world which represents that. And that is the positive aspect of India. Very few people know those details, and I wish people know and learn and spend a little time knowing about who we are and what we represent. And that's what cultural diplomacy is all about, which is about values of sharing and caring, and also the values of accepting people the way they are.
Great. Ma'am, how is India leveraging soft power as a cultural diplomacy in the global politics and in the world?
So leveraging means what? Leveraging means using that position to get any benefits or anything. I would say not in that sense. We use cultural diplomacy to the extent to tell people who we are, and we are peaceful people. We are people with credibility, and we are people who have very deep clarity on what is right and what is wrong, and we are bound by the principles and values what we represent, and we are absolutely point blank clear in communicating who we are and what we believe in.
Yes, very rightly said, ma'am, because our preamble, it also talks about national integrity and brotherhood, brethren, and I think that is a very beautiful representation of a cultural diplomacy in the global front. And ma'am, in further to that, what are the effective pathways with respect to the cultural diplomacy in the educational field for Indian students across the world?
So Indians by and large, I would say, are the people who have really not been part of troublemakers. They are not the troublemakers. They are usually people who are kind, compassionate, helpful. In addition to having great values of assimilation and accepting other cultures, they are not the problem creators anywhere. They are not in conflict with law in most countries. So I always say that if you look at the world culture or the global culture like a salad, so Indians are like part of that salad, where they retain their identity without disturbing the existing structure and assimilate completely with the other cultures, be part of the solution and not be part of the problem. And that's where Indian students are. But I genuinely wish and pray that countries recognize that, because I think with all the goodness, we usually have got the rough end of the stick. Many universities across the globe have made regulations where they ask Indian students to pay complete fees upfront as compared to other nationalities. I think few methods are unfair to Indians, and that people need to understand the value of who Indians are and their commitment to the work and their commitment to the goodness, and not take people for a ride.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we all know that in the past few years, Indian diplomacy has taken a different role altogether in the global politics. And how do you think, ma'am, cultural diplomacy has taken or turned the table in the global politics as well?
I would just correct you a little.
Yeah.
It's not about turning the table, it's about being invited to every table. And as representation of India is through our Prime Minister, most of the tables across the globe, whether it's G20, G7, BRICS, UN, that particular place has been leveraged by India, and all those tables and all those halls are open for India and dealing with India. So that's where our acceptance comes, and that's where showcasing the strength of India as a culture, as a civilization also comes. And we represent a very, very old civilization, which is, when people talk of time, we do not talk of 400, 500, 700,000 years. We talk of 5000 BC, 6000 BC. So that's the kind of history India possesses.
Yes, ma'am, because I think when we talk about diplomacy, I think diplomacy started from Chanakya period, because Chanakya was an epitome of a diplomat. I think he led the word diplomacy back in time, and yes.
So I would say Chanakya was there, but you have examples in Ramayana, for example, which is far beyond the Chanakya's period. And Ramayana, Angad goes to the court of Ravan, and he actually describes what an ambassador is and what are the rules of being an ambassador. And Mahabharata also showcases Krishna as a diplomat, where he says, if you want to stop the war, give them 5 villages, so that there is a negotiation of how kingdoms should run. And Krishna is a diplomat. So we have plenty of examples in our culture, in our tradition. And much before Vienna Convention came into existence, I want to tell the world that Mahabharata and other such scriptures possess that knowledge, where there was a regulation that you don't attack the enemy camp after sunset.
Yes.
You do not attack the civil population. You do not destroy the places of worship. You do not kill women and children. You do not destroy the crops of the farmers. Those were the regulations which Indians followed.
Absolutely, ma'am. And I think that's a very beautiful connotation of that we are not the troublemakers, we are the solution.
We are part of the solution.
Solutions. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, how is India positioning itself in the realm of international relations and cultural diplomacy?
No, India is, Prime Minister has said someplace that, in Hindi, if I may say, ना नज़र झुका के ना नज़र उठा के आँख में आँख डाल के बात करो, which means that not to look down upon anyone and not to look up to someone. Diplomacy is also about dealing with small, big, whoever country as one-on-one, as friends, looking into the eyes of each other and having a heartful conversation. That's what India stands for, and that's what we want to propagate to the world. We have been there, we've seen it all, how people mistreated, ill-treated, misbehaved, but when we are getting stronger, we continue on the path of righteousness and deal with people as people should be dealt with respect and dignity.
I think being righteous is the part of India.
Righteous, and also being able to convey
the message.
Yeah.
Nice, ma'am. Ma'am, now that I have just now finished my master's here, and I could see that artificial intelligence has actually called upon many roles, and not only in the STEM education but also in the diplomatic fields. How do you think, ma'am, artificial intelligence has shaped the world of diplomacy with respect to India and with respect to global leaders as well?
So I look at it from from a very different perspective. I would say diplomacy is about how we live and everything we live about.
Yes, ma'am.
Our energy requirements, our technology requirements, our food requirements, our happiness requirements, all those have to be met with through various means, and artificial intelligence will have its role on the basis of application. So artificial intelligence is nothing but a tool to enhance communication and to use it whichever way we want to. And ultimately, the use lies in the hands of people who know how to use. So whether it's diplomats, it's singers, it's dancers, it's writers, it's engineers, they will use AI the way they want to. But as a person who understands law, legislation and societies, I feel whether it's artificial intelligence or it's information technology, all needs to be handled under the laws, and laws have to be very firm in managing fair processes. And also do not allow illegal methodologies. Unfortunately, many illegal methodologies also take part in the world. And finally, the life has to be lived in reality and not virtually. So the applications usage has to be in real life, whether they are capable of causing chaos, they are able to mimic people in a wrongful manner, or the tech is actually planting and promoting violence or falsification of reports and authorities. I think all that needs to be dealt with, and that's where the Committee of Nations, countries by and large, politicians at large, legislative bodies, executive bodies, all need to come together to find a fair methodology, from fair algorithms to fairness of fair use of artificial intelligence.
Thank you, ma'am. But ma'am, like our Honorable Prime Minister has already given an edge to, and here Prime Minister has also said that the usage of artificial intelligence should be there into education system as well, because the Indian education system, like we recently changed the Indian education system a few years ago,
NEP,
also,
yeah.
and NEP programs, and artificial intelligence has played a great role into that as well, wherein we are imparting the different kind of education and different courses as well, right from the primary to the secondary and definitely to the college and the university levels as well. But ma'am, do you think with the imparting of AI into education system and with the usage or the extra usage of social media, the youth, the current generation and the future generation of India, they are decisive, they are taking the decisions on the basis of AI and social media, what is happening on the social media, or they are just getting into they are doing the research into the subject matter, what is happening in the global politics or elsewhere, because social media, they have been quite influenced by social media. There is always the pros and cons.
Yeah. You last line is what matters. There are pluses, there are minuses.
Yeah.
There are people who believe in what the WhatsApp university says. There are ones who do not believe in and have the capacity to go back. So what I would say that artificial intelligence and availability of information on a press of a button has made some of our people little lazy.
Okay.
So people, when we were growing up, I'm not saying we were better, but this technology was not available. So we would go to the library and study books and read, and there was no other option of satisfying your curiosity. You had to be in the library a lot. So I always say that lawyers and academics and other people, we are biased to the books and we are biased to the coffee. So these two things we need constantly to keep us going. And I just feel that that was a better method. Not that the books do not misprint and books do not circulate wrong information. We know a whole lot of books misprinted and were circulating wrong information. But just because availability of information on Google from all sides is easy, so people have become lazy and stop going to the library. And that's where we need to emphasize that even if You're reading ebooks, it's fine, you read the ebooks, and always try and get two opposite points of views. So when you get two opposite points of views, you are able to come to a decision based on your own merit and your own idea of deference to a central position, and accommodate the position which you think is right and must be right in those opposing circumstances.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, how leadership has changed with the advent of artificial intelligence in India, both in the public and the private sector?
So I feel when it comes to Industrial Revolution 4.0, India with its huge skilled manpower has done extremely well, because when it comes to Indian brains in terms of handling these challenges, we have used our power to build networks, and I don't want to give the names of the banks, etc., or the international agencies which are being served from India, and a whole lot of Indians are at the back end of many successful businesses. Of course, you all know Google, Pichai, and Microsoft, and you know all these people are basically run by Indian brains, and a whole lot of others. So back end you'll always find an Indian handling the tech part of it, so which is good, and we can't allow our youth to be away from the technical developments which are happening around. At the same time, I always maintain that artificial intelligence is artificial. The real intelligence lies in the heads of people who write those programs, and that intelligence cannot be lost, because there is too much artificial intelligence available, and our minds, instead of evolving, get blunted. So our minds need to remain sharp, and we need to constantly work upon the basic mathematical skills, counting skills, differential skills, so that we remain above board and we remain in control of artificial intelligence, and not the other way around, that I have forgotten my tables because a calculator is available to me.
Yeah, that's very rightly said, ma'am. And it reminded me of my education, when I was in my primary classes, and even in the secondary classes, we were taught to think, do the critical and the logical analysis more.
Sure.
And that's how it has shaped our education, and that's how we are in the global arena where we are representing. Every Indian is representing somewhere, in be it in the tech industry, in the medical background, or elsewhere, so, or even in the diplomacy. So everywhere India is represented because of its logical, critical thinking
nature.
Yeah, and its hardworking nature, and they have been greatly applauded for their services, what they are doing. Thank you, ma'am. And that brings me to another question as well. How do you think that, ma'am, women has shaped themselves in today's time with the advent of not only artificial intelligence, I would say, women leaders, I would say specifically, but also with the changes of with the change in the education system, with respect to international relations, and with respect to the diplomacy? Because I don't think that diplomacy is a big term, but diplomacy is not just confined to the two countries' bilateral relations or multilateral relations. It's within the two organizations as well, and women has played a very pivotal role into it. And how the women of India do you think would represent diplomacy?
So let me explain two things. Your question on artificial intelligence, your question on diplomacy, your question on how the two interact, especially in Indian context. So very few people know that 44% and above is the rate of women in India who are in STEM subjects, which is highest in the world. Very few people know that while in 1928 and 1932, right to vote and considered as individual, women were considered as individual, and again I'm talking like a lawyer, because only an individual can enter into a contract of buying a car, of getting a contract of job, of getting a house rent agreement done, or buying a property, you need to be an individual. Women were not considered individual till 1928 and 1932. Would you believe that? And till which means 20th century, and that is the story. But in India, people abused Manu, Smriti, and so on and so forth. But few century before, AD and BC, as one may look at the timeline, gave women the right to hold property under Istri Dhan, which was not given to women anywhere. So, considering the complexity of life and complexity of existence, people need to understand Indian system, but we also have a story of imperialistic imperialism and also slavery for a very long time, our culture being brought down and looked down. With all that, our social systems also broke down. And we suffered, the society suffered, and from there only after independence did we start rebuilding ourselves. And in that rebuilding process, women in India, right from 1947 and 1950 when our constitution came into was rolled down, from that time till now, women in India could participate anywhere and wherever they chose to. Aside from the fact that women were ambassadors right from 47 onwards, women even before 47, 1945 or so, when the League of Nations was established, women representative in the UN brought the change in the Human Rights Declaration. Not many people know that the declaration was all men are born equal. And Hansa Mehta from India stood up and said, not all men, but all humans are born equal. And that slight change actually brought forward that when you think of power, when you think of position, when you think of placement, you only think of men. But Indian perspective was to think of humans irrespective of the gender, and that is the Indian perspective even when we were not even a free nation. And that's what goes to show what Indian civilization is all about. Since I know your name and I know Rachita Dhar is from Kashmir originally, I must tell you something. I'm not sure, maybe you know it, but I just thought I'll share for the sake of sharing with the public that Kashmir was part of Indian civilization which was ruled by 13 women kings. So 13 women rulers in Kashmir existed before the advent of Islam. And the last one was a Muslim woman who ruled Kashmir, and she was a lame person also. And not many people know this about Kashmir. So from Kalahan's Raj Tarangini to other sources, there's a huge history of India where people need to understand that women were rulers, women were warriors, women were the commanders of the army. And Kashmir, there was a woman king later, and she was the commander of the army. So we have a very, very varied history, and many people don't understand and know us.
Yes, ma'am. I think the ruler you're referring to is Rani Dida. Yes, and
Last one.
yes, and apparently, ma'am, I have done my research on that as well, because Rani Dida, Kota Rani, they were the warriors and they were the queens of India.
The one who got killed by Tikka. And she fought the war, because when we talk about Kashmir, it is not the present Kashmir, it was the entire region which is now part of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the war was fought in Afghanistan. And she went from here to fight the war.
Yes, absolutely, ma'am. Women were the real warriors, and they have also yes, and they have been serving, both men and women have been serving India, and they have been the backbone and the steel of they were the steel of India. I mean, they were strong enough since time immemorial.
The society allowed that to happen. So let's give credit less to women and more to the social system, which allowed women to flourish.
Exactly, exactly. And definitely, it's not about having a men officer or a women officer. It's always about being an officer. So there are no gender roles defined into it. It's just a role that you are serving into.
And they are capable people and they are incapable people.
Yes.
So it could be, I usually say, I have seen very timid men and very strong women, and I have seen very honest men and very corrupt women. So whether it's corruption or it's strength, it's an individual trait. It has got nothing to do with the gender.
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. And that brings me to the last question. What is your opinion on the, in general, on the current situation globally with regard to international relations, and with respect to international relations in democracy and peace?
So I have a strange thought, and that thought is, for me, democracy works the best because my civilization has allowed it to flourish. But I do not know how the system operates for certain countries. Example being Libya, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and you have to give it to their history. When were the most peaceful times in their country and for those civilizations and for those countries and societies by and large? And I am being pretty straightforward because I feel we use democracy as the global benchmark. Very few people would know that India is the mother of democracy. Right from the Rigvedic time to the present time, we have been democratic, and that's part of our DNA. So Rigved talks of Sabha and Samiti, which means two houses, an elected house and also a nominated house. It talks about king, but not in the imperialistic sense, but king was an office more like a prime minister. It was an elected office, right from Rigved. So you can imagine people who do not wish to understand us, who do not want to research us, who do not want to understand it, use sometimes some incidents to handle, and while dealing with non-democratic powers when it suits them. So I think sometimes hypocrisy needs to be cast aside, and people just need to see things as they exist and deal with the situations and circumstances the way they exist. And we must allow people to get a voice and people to be able to develop themselves, that they reach the evolution of a democratic society. I've been talking to so many people recently. So there are faults of democracy also. I mean, many people complained that 8 months, 9 months the governments last, and then there is a new minister and there's a new prime minister, and there is no continuity of policy. I don't know whether that serves the purpose of democracy. And so while multiple voices get their say, but there has to be some semblance of order for a little longer time so that people get to exhibit what they want to do to the society and whether they are good enough or not. And then people should always have a authority to dismiss the governments if they wish to dismiss it.
And ma'am, what is India's stance in today's conflict? There's so many conflicts that are happening around the globe. So how is India taking its stance in terms of diplomacy?
We are very clear, and repeatedly Prime Minister's made a statement that this is a time of peace and not of war, and diplomacy and dialogue need to be preferred over war. And through the history we have seen that post League of Nations came into existence, UN came into existence. Till now we are members and we do the needful, But we also know that the purpose for which this League of Nations or United Nations was created needs a review. And that review is whether all are equitably represented or not, all points of views are coming forward or not, whether democracy is getting its say in that system or not, or only 5 countries decide what is good for the world and what is bad for the world. A country like India, which represents 18% of the global population, does not get a say, and countries like a group like African Union, which we pushed the agenda and got them a place on the high table of G20, do not get a say. So I think people need to face up to the challenges, come together, address the issues the way they exist if you want a real solution. If you do not want a real solution and want to play hide and seek with the issues, this is what the world will face. So India is very, very clear that we are committed to the world order under the law, and we are committed to the rule-based order. We are committed to the regulations, laws, and we feel everyone should be equally committed to the same, and it cannot be used as a handle to handle others while ignoring your own wrongs. That cannot be so.
Yes, that's very, very well said, ma'am. And ma'am, what do you think is the future prognosis of democracy and peace with respect to India and with the global perspective?
Prognosis is that right from 45 and beyond, every year there have been some region or the other which has gone through the conflict. So conflicts are constant. We need to review our authority, whether we have successfully handled the conflicts. We have given a space for conflicting nations to come together on the diplomatic table. So one way is to prevent a conflict from taking place. If we see there's something likely to happen, can we intervene and diffuse the situation? That should be the preferred way, one way. Second, we are not able to refuse it, but conflict happens. Do we provide a platform where a solution can take place? And if we don't provide that, situation will be what it is. So these two things need to be addressed holistically.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, do you think that India's geographical situation is in a way where India is surrounded by the conflict zone countries and the conflict zone areas? And do you think India would maintain its peaceful relations and in the same similar way as it is doing right now, and it is setting an example for the world that India is actually setting an example for the world that how peaceful, not from today onwards, but since the beginning, that no matter how chaotic the situation goes around the world, we are still the solution providers. We always welcome and warmly, no matter what. So we are actually the people who say that Vasudevam Kutumbakam. We welcome the guests. We think that the whole world is the one family. But the geographical condition, the geographical front of India is not in the similar way. So, do you think that India would still like to maintain, would be able to maintain its peaceful stance?
So I would say that we have handled situations since time immemorial, which have had its own repercussions, and more and more people from our northern front and the western front kept pushed to this side, and thus our population is what our population is, whereas those areas got depopulated. But we've lived in chaotic atmosphere for a very long time. We know how to stand for what is right and handle it both diplomatically and through other means, and we are ready whatever the situation demands, with all possibilities and all exigencies. We've done it, we can still do it. So this idea of sovereign nation and autonomous nation is what we believe in, and no matter how hard our circumstances have been, we have managed it well and will continue to manage it further.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your time, ma'am. It was wonderful having you here, and thank you for such an insightful talk with you, wherein we not only talked about the diplomacy, but we also had a word about how culture from India has been talking about diplomacy since like 5,000 years ago.
BC.
BC. I mean, like seriously, and about politics, about United Nations, about everything. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your insightful words, and we look forward to your further collaborations.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
ma'am.
Thank you.